Good morning, guys. How you guys doing? We're going to talk about blends today, just some basic information to start off with on how to use blends with your animals. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Christina Campbell. I am your Dr. Oily Mom. I'm the mother of two beautiful children and wife to a surgeon, and I'm a physician myself, practicing medicine for about 20 years now, board certified in emergency medicine. But my passion is wellness. So I want to talk a little bit about blended oils with animals and how to use them and the things, just the basics of what you need to be aware of. So, and Dr. Shelton's book is interesting because she separates the blends into physical and emotional oils. So those that would be primarily used as an emotional oil or for emotional issues, and the other for more physical applications. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I mean, I guess inherently we know that based on the names of the blends and how we're using them, but I thought it was interesting that she separated those out in the book. But the big thing with blends has to do with the fact that they are blended, and we don't necessarily know, because Young Living is the only oil I will use. Because I know that I can count on them being 100% therapeutic. And we talked about the seed to seal process, and I put a post in this educational forum about that. So please, if you haven't seen that yet, go back and look. But because they are a huge company, they have their proprietary blends. And these blends are amazing, but they don't tell us, they don't tell anyone really, because it's a company secret. So they don't tell us exactly how much concentration of each different oil is in the blend. So for instance, with Thieves, which is a blend of rosemary, eucalyptus, lemon, cinnamon, and clove, I think I got them all. We don't know how the company puts it together. How many drops of rosemary per eucalyptus, per lemon, per cinnamon, per clove. For instance, and this is just an example. Now, Thieves may be a bad example because I know there's a recipe that's been out online. It's been out for a really long time based on the history of Thieves. So just take this at face value. But for most animals, and including humans, the limiting factor in that particular oil would be cinnamon. So to use this blend in an animal, you'd have to go and look. Depends on what animal you're using it in. If you've got a ferret, say. So you'd have to look up with ferrets how you have to use each oil in the blend, which one would be if there's any safety issues, and then you would have to taper or change your application of the blended oil sort of conservatively to make sure you're allowing for whatever safety issue may be. So for instance, with cinnamon can be an issue for some smaller animals, cinnamon and clove. There can be some, there's some research that suggests there may be some anticoagulant type issues with it at high levels. I honestly haven't had that experience, but I haven't used it in a lot of really small animals either, at least not topically or orally. So I'm not a great one to talk about that. But that being said, according to the literature, cinnamon and clove can be an issue. So you would look, if you had a ferret and you wanted to use Thieves, you would go and you would look up cinnamon and look and see what you can do, how diluted does it need to be, and then you would copy that with your blend. And it will be a conservative measure, meaning because it's blended, you'll obviously be less concentrated even than what the suggestion is, but you want to be very careful whenever you're using a blend to make sure that you're still following the safety guidelines for each oil. So that is a really great reason, if you're going to be using blends, to have a desk reference at home so that you can look up what your concerns may need to be with each oil in that blended concoction. Okay, Abundance would be another great example of that. Now, Abundance is not in our kit, but you can use your blended oils as a source of a single. So if, for instance, you were looking for myrrh and you didn't happen to have myrrh, but you wanted to use myrrh in your animal for whatever purpose, or reason, then you might, and you had abundance on hand. Well, abundance has myrrh in it. So you might say, oh, I wonder if I can use that for myrrh. So then the question is, what else is in abundance? And is it an issue for your pet? What type of pet are you using it on? How are you using it? What is the method of application? How concentrated? All those things. So abundance is another one that has high cinnamon content. In fact, it may even be higher than thieves. It also has clove and ginger, and those can be issues with some animals in large concentrations. So these are just things to keep in mind. So when you're using a blended oil to apply a single that you're looking for, or if you're using a blended oil for the purpose of whatever that blend is, regardless, you kind of need to dissect the oil and figure out what's in it and how you have to use each one. It makes it a little labor intensive in the beginning, but really, if you think about it, once you start using these blends and these oils with your animals, you're going to know. I mean, you look it up once, you're going to know what you did last time and how it worked and how your animal responded. So that's, I just throw that out there. Another good example would be something like AromaLife. AromaLife has helichrysum in it. So if you didn't happen to have helichrysum on hand and you wanted to use helichrysum with your animal, then AromaLife, if you had it on hand, might be a great blend for that because it has a high concentration of helichrysum in it. But it also has cypress in it. And so when you're talking about birds and exotics, cypress hasn't been used a lot orally with these animals. So you would want to be very careful in how you used AromaLife with those types of animals. And you may not want to use it orally just because there hasn't been a lot of literature on it. Not because something bad might happen, we don't know. But because it hasn't been used very often in these animals, you just might want to be careful. So I don't want to be a fear monger. I'm not trying to create fear here because I've never really had a bad experience with 100% therapeutic oil. I have not. With any oil I've used from Young Living, I've never had a bad experience. I've had experiences where it's been too concentrated or my animal didn't like it because it was too concentrated. So I have done a lot of learning how to use with different animals, which is what I'm trying to share in this forum. So again, I don't want you to be fearful, but the way these oils, or at least the way this started with Dr. Shelton, was she had animals that essentially were ready to be put down. Like there was nothing else. That was actually her beginning with oils. There was nothing else that could be done for these animals. They were talking about putting them down, and she thought, you know what? I'm just going to throw some oils on them and see what happens. And that's how her whole practice with essential oils began. And she had great results. And so then she started documenting everything she did and how many times she used it and what was the concentration. And this is how she ended up developing this desk reference. So that's kind of her story. From a veterinary practice using essential oils in animals. And so again, it's just something that she hasn't used a lot in specific types of animals, not necessarily that you wouldn't or couldn't, but that it hasn't, and so we don't know. So there we go. All right. So if you have a choice, obviously, if you have a choice that's been used before and you know how to use it and it will approach your purpose or affect your animal the way you want, then that would be a good choice, right? That just makes sense. So another thing that I found very interesting and intriguing is an emotional raindrop. So she talks about the oils being physical and emotional. And we get that, right? Because stress away. I don't know how many of you keep stress away in your car for that car that cuts you off and just really riles you up, and that stress away helps. Or when the kids are fighting in the back seat, for real, it's like, yeah, I need my stress away, right? So obviously that's an emotional oil that's helping me emotionally. There are obviously other physical things in that oil that can be used as a physical purpose as well, but primarily I use it as an emotional oil. So I thought it was really interesting that she actually separated them. Also, she talks about doing an emotional raindrop. And I'm actually gonna try this on my cat. We are in the process of adopting 2 new kittens. Now, my cat, Sasha, who you guys have seen pictures of along the way in this forum, lost her sister about a year ago. They came home with us as 6-week-old kittens, and we've had them ever since. And Angel passed away. She was the weaker cat, and she passed away last year. They would be 15 this year. Sasha is 15 this year. So we're going to bring home 2 new kittens, and I'm certain that in the trauma, Sasha's kind of gotten past some of that trauma, and I've used Trauma Life with her and diluted samples and diffused it at night, and that seems to be, she settled down quite a bit after that. But now I'm considering doing an emotional raindrop when we're bringing her in new kittens to help her kind of cope. So I'll let you guys know how that goes. I don't know whether I'll be able to get it on video just because she doesn't sit still for very long for oils. She will if she's really uncomfortable, but we'll see. If I can get it on video, I will. I'll absolutely share that. That would be awesome, but I can't make that guarantee. So, but I will let you know how it goes. So the emotional raindrop, the idea behind it is that you would take 6 to 8 or less emotional oils that you think would address the problem your animal is exuding, right? Whatever your animal is expressing or what you think may be going on with them. And you would pre-dilute those oils depending on what animal you're using it for. So obviously with cats, it would be more diluted than with dogs and larger animals. And you guys have probably come to see the pattern with each oil that we've talked about. Cats typically are more diluted. Exposures, and rarely are you using air diffusion with them. But the larger animals, air diffusion is usually okay, and the more and using neat oils is usually okay. So I think you guys probably have started to catch on to the pattern. At least I hope so. But so you would dilute based on your animal, and you'd have to look it up depending on which oil you were using. So I can't really kind of just throw a bunch of things out, but you would look those things up, and then you would apply them. There's no real right way or wrong as far as the order. There's no right or wrong order to apply these oils. Like with the raindrop method, the technique that was developed by Gary Young is very specific. In the order that the oils are used and how they're used. With the emotional raindrop, it's not so specific, and you, as the owner or the loved one of the animal, will know, or at least can make a good guess as to what order would be the best order to apply those oils. And so you would do that, and you would use that similar you would use a similar method to the species-specific raindrop, and you'd have to look those all up because I really can't go through every species specific raindrop that is in this book because it's quite extensive what she's done with that. So it's well worth getting that book if you want to use raindrop in your animals. It's well described and it's pretty awesome. I have used raindrop with my cats. So anyway, so you want to have your things pre-diluted. And then you would drip each one according to the species-specific. You would use it according to the species-specific raindrop. And then you would be able to repeat that again based on how often you can repeat that type of treatment with your species-specific raindrop. So in the beginning, if you wanted to try something like that, it would be a little labor-intensive, just looking up all of the different blends, the different singles that are in the blends, and then diluting accordingly. But really, at least for my Sasha, I think it's going to be well worth the effort for me to try in order to help her kind of ease her into these new kittens. She's never been around kittens, and she's an older cat. She's well established in her ways, and she's really just gotten over the loss of her sister. So I'm hoping she'll embrace the new life in the house as someone else to play with. But we'll see how it's going to go. So anyway, that's the basics on the blends, on how to use blends in your animals, and we'll go through the blends in the kit one by one, starting with Digize. I'm actually going to go alphabetical just because that was the way I looked them up and studied them for you, and so that's what we're going to do. So we'll do Digize first, and I have to cook my kids something to eat, and then I'll get back to this hopefully after they eat. So we'll see you guys soon.